Hello, hello! Today we're going to talk to Hunter. He's going to share with us his story in regards to navigating pornography. He's extremely open and vulnerable with us, which I'm so grateful for. It's a topic that can be uncomfortable. I'm just really grateful that you're here and you're willing to listen to this conversation as it's really prevalent in our community. So without further ado, we'll let Hunter share his story, and I will give you a little heads up. The audio in this isn't great, but please stay and listen because the content is really important.
Well, before I go into my story, I just want to make it clear. I take this subject on a little bit more of a lighter note because that's really helped me, feel a lot less shame around it. So if I make some jokes here and there, it's not that I don't take this topic seriously. It's just that's what I found really helpful, not only for me, but for a lot of the people I work with. So my story started out with, it was actually crazy timing. In 2007, I was about 10 years old and the first iPod Touch came out. And this was the first time ever in history that kids now have internet in their pocket. Like this had never happened before. And so, I'm 10 years old with this iPod Touch and, I'm a curious young boy, right? So one moment I'm playing Angry Birds, and then the next I'm on YouTube. And, I don't know if I would quite call it pornography. The very soft form is kind of how it all started. Think of like Walmart underwear magazine. Like that's kind of where it all started.
Love it.
Very innocent, very light, a lot of curiosity. And what started out as curiosity quickly turned into a coping mechanism. Whenever I was feeling maybe inadequate, maybe loneliness, maybe just bad in general. As a young boy growing up, you got a lot of insecurities. This is a way to escape for a little bit.
Did you recognize it as a coping mechanism as like an 11, 12, 13-year-old? Okay.
No.
So he's like, I need this right now.
Yeah. Okay. Just like I want
Looking
this.
Back.
And at the beginning of my journey, it felt very lonely and I felt very isolated. I thought I was the only one struggling with this. In middle school, I remember walking down the halls, almost feeling like depressed of just like, dang, like I'm the only one that's doing this right now. And then as we transitioned into high school, that's when people started to talk about it more, but in kind of a lighthearted, joking way. Like everybody does it. It's not a problem. You're weird if you don't, almost kind of a way. And so that's when things kind of escalated for me. Although I didn't feel as bad, it almost just felt like, oh, like I'm weird if I don't, kind of a thing. And that's when things, I would say, escalated probably to an addiction. Before it was kind of a habitual thing, but in high school, I was for sure addicted.
How many of the people in your sphere were doing the same thing?
Oh, 98%. I had one friend that didn't look at it and like, we're all like, dude, you're kind of weird. Probably out of our own insecurities, right? But he was like, I remember specifically one friend that didn't look at it. And that's it.
Wow.
So, I mean, some people more extreme than others, right? Some people would view it every day and some people, every once in a while, but it was for sure very prominent. And then, the saying is, like once you go on your mission, you stop, right? Like just do it now, whatever. When you get on your mission, that's when it all goes away, right? You're perfectly fine. So that was my mindset all through high school. I'm going to go about this. And when my mission comes, that's when I stop. That's it. But I didn't realize how big of a hole I was digging myself into by having that mindset. And so when my mission came around, it was like, hey, now it's time to stop. And I'm like, holy crap. Like I can't, I feel stuck. And that part was never talked about between the friends. No one ever talked about how difficult it actually was to stop viewing. So this is kind of an interesting topic, but some bishops will say like, hey, you have to be clean for 6 months. And, if that was the case for me, I probably wouldn't have served a mission. For me, it was do the best you can and we're going to send you out. And that was like exactly what I needed. And I went out on my mission and I didn't struggle with pornography on my mission. And that's what I needed. But I have friends that, weren't able to serve because, their bishop put that expectation of like 6 months, no mess ups. And it's like, if you mess up, another 6 months added, another 6 months. And then they just get to a point where like, I can't do this.
Can we pause on that for a second? How was your interactions with leadership within the church? People that you were probably talking to about this.
Yeah. Leadership was great. Yeah. I didn't have any problems with any bishops. They were all super supportive. I do feel like they weren't equipped to really handle it. And you got to give, the church some credit because this had never happened. Like the addiction rate completely surged from 2010 to 2018 because smartphones, internet access, it was an exponential curve of addiction through all of this. So you got to give them some credit. I think there's better resources now. People are better equipped, but the bishops kind of always were just like, be more spiritual, which kind of didn't really help because I felt like I was being very spiritual and it wasn't really helping. And now looking back, it's like spirituality definitely does help, but you also have to have the right tools to navigate this.
Yeah. That's more what I was curious about is, do you feel like, I guess you already said that, were they equipped to help you? Did they give you tools? When they say like you have to be off 6 months, are they, okay, let's figure this out together? Or it's like, just let me know how you're doing in 6 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, they're definitely like, they were there to support, but what I think I needed in that time was not, hey, read your scriptures more and go to the temple more. I think what I needed was, hey, we got to get rid of the shame that's around this. And you need to be able to love yourself even as you're struggling. Those are the type of things that I needed more than be more spiritual, which again, spirituality is a big part of it, but it's not the only part of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, fast forward, you're on your mission, you're not struggling with it.
On my mission was great. Came home and I was like, great. All I needed to do was serve a mission, right? Like I'm free now.
Yeah.
And then,
Miracle.
I served in Mexico where we had little walnut phones, an hour of internet access a week. And I'm using that time to write my friends, not look at porn, because that's the most valuable hour of the week.
Yeah.
And so I get home, I get my smartphone back, internet access 24/7. And I think, it probably took 6 months to fall back into it. And I realized I didn't actually take care of anything. I just avoided the problem. Like there was no possible way for me to view pornography. And there was, but like you had to go to pretty gnarly extents. And so now I'm back for my mission and this is never talked about. Like returned missionaries, like they don't struggle with porn, right? So now I'm back in this isolation, kind of depressed state of like, I'm the only one struggling with this again.
From high school, are you talking to them? Any of them that maybe did serve a mission? Was there any conversation with close friends or still not even that?
Not really. No, I think I was pretty ashamed of it and I didn't want to talk about it. Now talking to them, they all struggled. Most of them, not all of them, most of them struggled after their mission as well. And, the idea was, hey, I'm just going to go about life like normal. I'm going to date, I'm going to do all this, but I'm not going to get married until I've overcome this, right? That's my whole thought process. This is when I really started to take things seriously in like overcoming. And I just kept failing. Like I couldn't figure it out. And, I felt like I was a well-disciplined, like pretty dialed. I mean, not to boast, but like I felt really like dialed. Like I did well in school. I was really good socially. I had good discipline. I'd go to the gym every day, but I was just like, why can't I kick this? And, kept meeting with bishops and the same thing, like go to the temple more. And I'm like, Bishop, I'm working in the temple once a week. Like I can't go more than what I'm going right now. And so the answer was always just be more spiritual, be more spiritual. And, looking back again, that's not the only thing that I needed. I needed more.
That's hard, Hunter. I haven't navigated pornography in that way, but I think we all have something. I think we live in a world where ease of access to everything is just, it's everywhere. So we all have something that I think we deal with, and quitting something is hard. But then to feel like you're giving it your all and still not making any progress is really frustrating. And then have no one to talk to about it is just
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I just feel for you.
Yeah. A really eye-opening moment was I went to 12 steps from the church because they do addiction recovery and then they also do a pornography specific recovery. And I remember going in college, and I remember me and my buddy were the only single guys there. And then I was like,
Mm.
wait, what? Like married guys struggle with this? Like that doesn't make sense to me because, you know, the intimacy that you're able to have with your spouse, you'd think, oh, why would you need pornography if you have intimacy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of eye-opening for me. And, you know, fast forward, I meet my now wife, Sarah, and I felt really strongly that we needed to get married, even as I was still struggling. So I opened up to her while we were dating about where I was at with everything. And I promised her that I don't know if perfection is possible, but I promise open and to always be honest about it. And with that, you know, it was obviously hard for her, but she felt good about moving forward with the relationship and we got married. And, you know, again, kind of the mission statement is like, oh, the first 12 months of being married, like I didn't really struggle with it. Like we were on the honeymoon phase. Everything was good. Like I didn't really struggle. And again, I don't think I really solved the reason why I was going to pornography in the first place. I was just kind of always trying to avoid it. And a year into our marriage, I find myself back into that hole of like, dang, I'm back where I started. And now I'm like, again, married people don't struggle with this. That's, you know, if pornography is not talked about, pornography while you're married is definitely not talked about. I kept an open dialogue with my wife and, you know, we tried tons of things. I have probably spent over 20 grand on different courses, coaches,
Wow.
therapists, you know, everything, just trying to figure it out. And we got to this point where, you know, he came to me and she didn't want a divorce, but she basically said, I don't know how much longer I can deal with this. And that's when, you know, probably rock bottom was. And
Yeah.
that's when I took a step back and was like, okay, everything that I've tried is not working. So I need to try something new. And that's when this path of throwing everything I knew about addiction out the window and starting completely from scratch, doing tons of research on what actually works. And, you know, the first real step of progress that I made was when I was researching something about just addiction in general. And it talked about how shame can fuel addiction and how opening up about what you're currently struggling with can actually really help. And so I was like, yeah, I'm willing to try that. Like, I'll start talking about it. So I started talking about it with my sales buddies. I started talking about it in smaller groups. I even opened up I was in this like mastermind group with 50 other guys, and I opened up to them in front of everybody about it. And, you know, that's when things like really started to change for me is actually talking about it. And, you know, I didn't really understand what was happening, but, you know, whenever I had tried to quit in the past, it always felt like I was just white knuckling, just going to battle with it and like completely struggling with it. But when I started to open up, you know, the desire just slowly started to fade away. Like, I was like, holy cow, like I haven't viewed in a month and I haven't, you know, I've gone a month, but it felt like really hard to get
That's
to
a
a
long
month.
time. Yeah.
Then when I started opening up and I started to feel less shame about it, it was like, oh, I just went a month and that was like pretty easy actually. So that's when things
Wow.
really started to shift for me.
How did people respond? Like maybe those first couple people And then even that group, how are people responding when you open up about it?
Yeah, it's one of two ways. One is if you talk to a guy, there's a very high chance that he is either currently going through it or has quite the past with it. And it has a lot of empathy for you. And then the second thing is if they don't struggle or they never have struggled, they still love you. They don't look at you any different than previously. And most of the time they actually love you more than they did in the past. So it's always been one of those two things is whenever I tell someone, they always talk about their experience or they just love me even more.
I love that. I asked because I've had people tell me, I think it's an older generation where it's probably steeped in more shame when they try to talk to them about it. And they say like, don't talk to me about this, which breaks my heart. But I think there's already been a movement towards what you're talking about. Like, let's destigmatize this a little bit. And so I would hope that people are always met with that reaction. I think it's more so that way now. I think it's just maybe an older generation, but you maybe can correct me. I don't know. It sounds like you also had good experiences with people in an older generation, maybe in a church setting, but.
Yeah. I mean, you got to give the older generation some slack too.
Yeah.
It wasn't as rampant as it is now. And, I do think there's a cultural shift about vulnerability right now and actually talking about things. And, that's just not how they were raised. And so it makes sense when, you start talking about something like pornography and they're like starting to freak out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But one thing I did want to say on that and, true connection with somebody is being fully seen and fully loved. And so if you can be fully seen as a person and then you can be fully loved, like that is true connection. That is true intimacy. So, when you're hiding yourself and, someone sends you love or gives you a compliment or anything, your thought is, oh, if they truly knew, what I was doing behind closed doors, they wouldn't love me. Right. But if you can open that part of you and let that be seen, bring it to the light, and then they still love you on top of that, that's when you can truly feel connection and love from others.
Yeah. I love that. It makes me, I have been curious, and I know you can't speak for your wife completely, but was there shame that she took on as you guys navigated the situation together? And has she done similar work to you in kind of overcoming that? Or what has her relationship been with shame in this story?
Yeah. Well, there's kind of two things. She was pretty ashamed of me struggling too, which makes sense, right? Like if I start opening up about it and people find out that I told her before we got married and we still got married, in a sense, there's shame for her of like, why'd you marry a guy that struggled with pornography kind of a thing. So that's something that she had to work through. And it wasn't easy, but, I think when she saw the fruits of opening up and saw how many people was actually benefiting, she was like, oh my gosh, now she's like totally on board. Like we're super open about it because of the fruits that we've seen from talking about it so openly.
That's really cool. Okay. I want to come back and talk about that, but let's finish. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say another thing that she, worked through with shame was not shaming me. As I started making progress, I still was like messing up here and there. And it was a rocky road of progress, and her learning not to shame me was a process, but ultimately that's exactly what I needed. I didn't need her to make me feel worse about myself because I was already beating the crap out of myself. And so we just needed to have a really open dialogue, and she needed to love me. And it's not that her feelings aren't valid, right? Her feelings are very valid for when I mess up. And so what we did is we created a system where she can go and talk to friends about it. And she can go express her feelings, not to me, but to her friends, trusted friends. And that really helped both sides.
That's high trust. That's cool of you guys. I think about that for our community at large. I'm wondering what you would say, because I think that's within your relationship, but how do me outside of your relationship, what can people do to, is it the way we talk about pornography? Is it just the rhetoric about pornography? What would you say to like a community at large to change in regards to pornography?
I would be very careful with a couple things. You hear things, and this is definitely culturally, this is not church. This is church culture, I would say. But you hear things like, oh, I don't want to marry a guy that struggles with pornography, which like
Yeah.
valid, right? Really valid to desire that. But at the same time, that does create a lot of shame. And so
Yeah.
I would just be careful how you talk about, guys that struggle with pornography. And then I would also be careful with the word addiction. Most people that I talk to aren't addicted to pornography. They just have a habit. The definition of addiction is when it affects your daily life. Like you can't function daily without your thing. And most people that I talk to are not addicted. It's just a habit. And when we label people as addicted, it actually makes it worse. And then two, you've heard comparisons of like pornography is worse than drugs and pornography is like heroin and like all this stuff is like, okay, do you think that's helping or hurting the situation by labeling it like that? Right. So just being mindful of how you talk about it. And, if you think about it, 4 out of 5 guys struggle with it. So if you're in a group of people, just picture 4 out of 5 guys are either currently or have gone through it. So we need to be a little bit more mindful of how we talk about it.
Yeah. What would you say to the girls that do say that? Like whether they're out of like genuineness or fear or whatever it is, what would you say to girls or females that say that I don't want to marry a guy that's navigating pornography?
Again, I think those feelings are valid. It's not a problem to say that or desire that. But, in my personal experience, what has actually helped me the most is my wife didn't define me as my addiction, right? She looked at me as a person, as a real human, right? And she saw so much more than just me struggling with pornography, right? And, that's ultimately why we got married, is because she was able to be like, okay, yeah, Hunter struggles with pornography, but how is he as a person? And then the fact that he, is even open and honest about it actually says a lot about the person that you're dating. So if someone comes to you that you're dating and says, hey, I'm struggling with pornography, instead of that being a red flag, I would see that as a green flag. Like he is actually opening up to you and talking to you about it, where most guys aren't going to. Most guys will be like, oh, once I get married, it'll go away. So I don't need to tell her.
Yeah.
You're 3 years into marriage and then you get caught and it's like a huge mess, right?
Yeah. Well, it's hard for me because you were 10 when you found pornography. Like you didn't choose like, this is what I want for my life at 10. And so I feel like you said, 4 out of 5 guys that are dealing with it, you're eliminating so many amazing people that are just navigating something. I feel like most people's stories, it's like they fall into it at 8, 9, 10. Honestly, you're all the way through being a teenager. It's like, you don't know what you're doing. You're a teenager.
Totally.
And so like, at that point, you're eliminating people. The hard thing for me is I remember thinking that in high school. And
that's
so
valid.
I get that that's valid, but I know not everyone listening is necessarily like, religious, but like for me, I believe in Jesus Christ. And as I learned about him, it's like everyone has the potential to become something. And also everyone is dealing with something. So if you're just going to choose one thing and you're going to say, I'm not going to marry someone that's dealing with porn. Well, I mean, you could choose anything and you're just going to eliminate everyone.
Well, one thing I want to say on that is I think we need more success stories out there, right? Like you don't hear a lot of like really positive experiences of like, this guy struggled with porn and then he overcame it and then they had a great marriage and he lived happily ever after. The stories that are out there right now are, oh, this guy struggled with pornography for 40 years, never told his wife, got divorced, cheated. We all have that friend or second cousin or, distant relatives that
True. Yeah.
struggled with porn and was a pervert and, all this stuff. And it's like, sorry, maybe a little
Yeah.
much there, but that's not the reality of it is, that's a very small percentage of guys that struggle. But there are a lot of success stories out there and they just need to be heard and they just need to be known. And that's one of my goals of opening up about my story is to create more of a positive look on it.
I love that. I think that's huge.
This might get a little bit controversial, but I'm just speaking from personal experience. What actually is the definition of success with this, right? Like
Mm.
you want to break your habit and you don't want it to be a habitual thing. But if I'm 45 years old and I mess up and I look at porn, does that mean that I'm back to square one, fully addicted and struggling?
Mhm.
Or, if I mess up and I'm 45, I can go to my wife, I can talk about it, we can talk about what happened, we can talk about what is going on in my life that makes me want to cope with pornography, and then we adjust and we move on. That to me is still success. Even if there is a relapse involved, there still can be a lot of success in that. And, a big step in my journey to recovery was taking that all or nothing mentality out of it. I was like, I have to be perfect. It's interesting because we can talk about, especially in our Utah culture, it's like we can talk about, oh yeah, no one's ever perfect, right? Like perfection is, that's not the goal. But, when it comes to pornography, that's like, oh, we need to be perfect, right?
Totally.
And
Yes.
again, that can be the goal, right? To be perfect. But, if you have a relapse once every couple years or once a year, or not justifying it, but just saying if that does happen and you have a system with your wife that you can talk to her about it and you can adjust and move on and grow from it, that's still a success to me. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to teach with a lot of the guys that I work with is like, what is the definition of success right now? Because you putting this pressure to never view again is actually just hurting your self-trust because, the likelihood of you messing up is high, especially in the world that we live in. And, if you promise yourself that you'll never view and then you go view, what did you just do to your self-trust? You just basically obliterated it. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting topic and can be controversial. And it seems like nobody wants to actually admit that, but that's often
Yeah.
what is needed to be talked about with guys that I'm working with.
Well, it's hard because my husband's always like, honestly, at this point, LinkedIn profiles feel like soft porn to me. So it's like,
Yeah.
you can't get away from it. Like, it's just there. But what was I going to say? Oh, I think taking away some of the spirituality away from it, I think the world we live in and the way that pornography is created and social media is not necessarily like a spiritual choice. It's not like a matter of your testimony in some cases, and this also might be controversial, but like we're biologically created a certain way and your brain is wired a certain way. And so once you've already created something, and I don't know what you would deem a mess up. Like I said, I see pornography probably every day. You know what I mean? And
For sure.
everyone's definition of pornography is different, right? So what is a mess up? But then just give yourself grace for the way your body's designed and the way that our world's created. And I don't know if you feel that same way, but it's like your brain's wired to want that and to need that. And I would give yourself grace from your spiritual aspect to say, don't get down on yourself for saying, oh, my testimony or my belief in God is less because I did this. Just like we live in a world or we live in a body that wants certain things. It's natural. It's normal.
That actually is a pretty heavy topic that we hit on. And, I'm just going to talk from my personal experience is nowadays, and let's just be honest, let's be open about it. When you go to the gym, like there are a lot of girls and guys that don't wear a lot of clothes. And like, that's the reality of our situation right now. And, when it was really toxic for me is when I would see a girl at the gym that, has worked really hard to achieve the body that she has. I would almost kind of like, what are those like horse, like blinders called?
Yeah.
blinders. And it was like, oh my gosh, don't look, I'm married, don't look. Like, and then if I'd look, it's like, oh my gosh, you're such a bad person, blah, blah, blah. Hey, look, I'm a male. God has designed me as a sexual being. And, I'm attracted to other people. Like, that's my human nature. And, it's so much better when I can walk past a girl and I can be like, wow, she's really attractive, right? She has a great body, just like as if I was admiring almost like a ballerina, like the art of movement and the art of the human body is so beautiful and so amazing. And it's like, I can just look at her, just be like, wow, she's really pretty, and move on. And that's it. But like,
Yeah.
if I try and like tell myself that I can't look, I almost find myself looking more than I would if just I accepted her beauty and I moved on. Right.
Yeah.
So that has been a big thing for me. And that's a big thing I harp on with the guys that I coach is like, guys, we're sexual beings. Does that mean you go stare at girls at the gym? Absolutely not. Does that mean you go up and approach them and talk to them? Absolutely not. But if you see a beautiful girl, acknowledge her beauty and move on. And it's so much easier. Like, your life will be so much easier if you can just do that.
Great idea. I feel like even, I don't know, when you're like first married, you're like, I can't think anyone else is attractive. Like, my husband's going to feel sad. And then, I don't know, maybe everyone goes through that. But then like a couple of years in, you're like, I'm like telling my husband, I'm like, saw a hot guy today. You know what I mean? It's like, once you can get over that, it's like we can talk about it. I've chosen, I love you. And I'm here, but I just think it's something that we all have to kind of like figure out.
And in my opinion, and right, we're freshly married. So like, how much do we actually know? But
yeah,
in my opinion, my relationship is so much better when my wife can come home and be like, I saw my gym crush today, and we like both like laugh about it. Cause it's like this 6'4" jack dude with a man bun. And I'm like, honestly, I have a crush on him too. So like,
yes,
we're on the
he's
same
your
page.
gym crush. I love it. Okay, let's fast forward to where you're at now. The last part of your story that you talked about was you were going a month at a time. You're kind of eliminating his shame. Tell us kind of from there where you've been.
Yeah. So there's lots of things that contributed to my success, and we've already gone over a few of them. And if we were to go over all of them, like, we would be here all day. But, I do want to hit on at least one more, and that was addressing trauma. And, I am definitely the type of guy that's like, I do not have trauma. I grew up in Utah. Like, I don't have freaking trauma, right? But, I had read something with my research on addiction. I had read that a trauma can be like a ball and chain to addiction, any type of addiction, not just pornography. Even if it's not related to sexual pornography at all, it's a ball and chain to addiction. And so I was like, okay, like, let's dive into this. And as I dove into it, I realized that I did have some pretty gnarly trauma that I just shoved down. I suppressed. I didn't take a look at. I didn't analyze it or process it. And, going through that process was really fascinating for me, but also so freeing, because I didn't realize how much I was being affected day to day by the trauma that was created when I was young. And, trauma shapes our behavior.
Yeah.
And so that was a really big step, is addressing trauma and being fully okay with myself. When you're fully okay with who you are as a person, your past, your present, it's like you don't feel a need to go cope with anything, whether it's pornography, overeating, social media, doom scrolling, like it's all kind of the same thing. But when you can fully just accept who you are as a person and love yourself, like, and love your traumas and love the hard things that you've gone through and process them, that's when I feel like, quitting pornography actually becomes really easy, because you don't have to focus on the pornography itself. You just focus on, loving yourself as a whole. And when you can do that, that's when it actually gets easy. I tell people quitting pornography is easier than you think. It's not what you think, but it's easier than you think, for sure.
That's still hopeful. Did you work with a therapist or you just navigated it on your own?
Whitley, this is a really, interesting topic, and I'm just going to say it how it is. But I started doing research on psychedelic medicine, and through some psychedelic medicine, it talked about how it's actually really one of the best cures to addiction because it does address trauma so well. And so not go into too much detail, like that's kind of what I did. And I think therapy could have worked. I think it would have took longer, but I think it's in this, I think they're the same thing. Just therapy is going to take longer and this is a little bit quicker, but you also have the legality things, and I did it all legal. And there's, clinics now that offer like ketamine, and that's a psychedelic. And that's one route that I took. And it's a great tool. And it's a great tool to help with addiction, to help with depression, to help with anxiety.
Yeah, I don't know enough about that.
Yeah, and again, like this is super taboo and I'm going to get judged for even talking about it. But when you're at a point and you are faced with the reality of your wife might divorce you because you can't overcome this, you become a lot more open to different things to approach. And that's kind of what led me to it.
Yeah.
And, anybody that's interested in doing some research, there's some cool podcasts with a current active bishop that experimented with this. He's on the Jimmy Rex show. I think his name is Bishop Daw. So you can just look him up. He has a really cool story about psychedelic medicine. And do I think psychedelic medicine is for everybody? No, I don't think so. I think,
it works for
just
you.
like, yeah, it worked great for me. And I don't feel like, I feel like it would almost be a disservice if I didn't just mention it. I heard a quote that said, the worst thing that's ever happened to you is still the worst thing that's ever happened to you, no matter how small or big it is.
Yeah. You don't need to compare your trauma to someone else's trauma. No point in that. Okay. Tell us what you're working on now.
Yeah. So, I went through a lot with pornography. And, as I was in the thick of it, I was looking for resources, and there's not a lot out there. And there's not a lot of success stories. And so I was in a successful sales job, but I just really felt called to pursue this more and to help other men find what I found with pornography and addiction, and kind of a new way to approach it that isn't just being more disciplined or more spiritual. It's actually providing tools that can help. And so that's, like, to be blunt, like that's where I'm at. That's kind of my full-time thing right now is I help guys. I mostly help married guys that struggle with pornography because I feel like, one, I can add a lot of value to the husband, but then my wife also works with me and she can add a lot of value to the spouse in helping the spouse not take it as something personally, right? Because rightfully so, when a husband says, "Hey, I looked at porn," the wife automatically is like, "Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not sexy enough. I'm not doing enough." But it's like, no, your husband's been struggling since he's 10 years old. Doesn't have to do anything with you. And so we help couples, be able to approach the conversation with her not taking it super personally, but also providing her a space where she can express her emotions, and then providing the husband, actual tools to help cope and not help cope, to provide tools that are more than just be spiritual. Like, we include the spirituality into it, and like, whatever you're doing spiritually, keep doing it. I'm just going to show you some more tools that you can add to your toolbox. And, we charge for it because people don't value things that are free. And, I don't want to half-ass it. Sorry. Excuse my language. It's like,
Your
I
excuse.
really want to give this my all and like really take this seriously and put all my energy into it and really help people, not just do it as like a hobby apart from my job, you know?
Yeah.
So we do charge for it. And, if people get results, they pay us. If they don't get results, they don't pay us. And that's how
Probably
we
worth
are.
every penny.
I mean, if you can break it, yeah, for sure. It's like, I remember in the thick of mine, I would have paid so much money to break it. But
Where can people find you?
okay, so I have my Instagram _hunter.clark, and then I have a school community, which is just a free resource for anybody. You can find that on my Instagram as well. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
I have actually a couple more follow-up questions that I forgot I wanted to ask and I'm so curious about, and then we can wrap it up. Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so how has pornography and the culture surrounding it affected your sense of belonging? And that's kind of like a loaded, very general question, but whether when you were younger and navigating the shame that you felt, did that affect your like you belong?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to the intimacy thing where, true connection is being fully seen and fully loved. And, a lot of my life, this was a part of me that I hid. And, I
Yeah.
don't know if I truly was able to receive people's love fully because I was hiding a big part of myself. I challenge people to open up about pornography, but not to the extent of like going on social media like I do. But, like all my secrets are out. Like I'm not hiding anything. Like I'm fully myself. There's no one could blackmail anything about me. So, in a sense, being open about it has made me feel more part of the community and more loved because, people know who I am through and through and like they still love me. And
Let me for it, I think.
yeah.
That is so interesting. It's huge. Yes. True intimacy, being seen, but if you're not allowing other people to see you, then how are you going to feel like you belong? Because it's the piece of you that's missing. I'm passionate about creating community and unity, but that's huge. If you can't feel like you can share a piece of you, then that's not a true space of belonging.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because the thought is if they truly knew who I was or what I was doing, they wouldn't love me, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
when you're seen, you can't have that thought.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I've been so grateful for everything you've shared.
Yeah, if someone is currently struggling with pornography, one, they can obviously reach out to me and we have a program that they can join. But, if that's not in the picture for them, the first thing that I would say if someone is struggling is just start opening up about it. Start talking about it with people. Even if it's just one person, that can make such a big difference. And if you're married and you're struggling with it, like you got to talk to your spouse about it. And, those are a few things that I would say in regards to all of it.
Well, I love that. Do you feel like it's in your wheelhouse to talk to parents or leaders about how to approach this? I know you just talk to people navigating it, and I know you're not doing that right now, but do you feel like that's something you could do?
Yes, I could, but I don't feel like I have like a system or a process quite dialed yet. I could just give my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, if parents want to reach out to me, it's like I can tell them my experience and how I wish I was handled as a teenager going through this. So I can definitely, give out that value, but still working. We're still fresh and learning a
You're on
lot
the
right
grind.
now.
I get it. I think for myself as a parent, understanding that, I think community leaders, I think religious leaders, I've spoken to like parents and family members that are in situations like that, or also like interact with people that are in those positions, and then not having the skills to interact with youth that are navigating that space. And that's where it starts. And like you said, you kept thinking, okay, if I go on my mission, if I get married, like, what if just like 12-year-old John is like, I want to be over this. And for someone to help him at 12 versus at 24, you know what I mean? I think that'd be huge.
The biggest thing I'd say to parents is just, you got to be really careful with shame, and
Yeah.
shame is going to make things a lot worse. So, love your kids no matter what, and, educate them that they are sexual beings and it's okay to be attracted to women and be attracted to these things on the internet, but then also teach them the natural consequences of pornography. It really does mess with expectations of what women should look like, of what sex should be like. And, right now I'm trying to find that balance of like, how do you teach the natural consequences of it without involving shame? It's a very fine line to walk across right now. And so I would just say the biggest thing is just loving them and teaching them that they're sexual beings. And, this, if I was to approach my kid right now, I'd be like, hey, like, your feelings are so supernatural. Like, it's normal to be attracted to Megan Fox as a 12-year-old boy. Like, that's like normal, right?
Yeah.
But, this is why I personally don't go look at pornography, is because it really does mess with expectations. And, that's as much as I could say right now.
You're going to be a good dad, Hunter. That's cool.
Thank you.
Thanks for your insight. I really appreciate it. All of it. I want to keep talking, but I think we'll maybe end it here. So thank you. It's been fun to sit with you.
If you made it this far, congrats. I honestly apologize for the audio in this episode, but I do think the content and the story was so important and so impactful for me. I know this topic can be uncomfortable for a lot of people. I think it's becoming less and less taboo, but I'm really grateful for the time and effort of Hunter to normalize this topic. It's such a big issue in today's world, and it's not something that we can really hide from. And so I think the more that we talk about it, the more we can overcome it. But more importantly, for the sake of this podcast and this community, is just that the more we talk about it, the more we can support each other and create a space of community where people can feel seen and loved, and they don't have to hide a piece of themselves, as Hunter talked about. So anyway, thanks for being here. As usual, subscribe, share with your friends so that we can create a better community here in Utah.